Well, today we are highlighting a grassroots organization called Silence is Not an Option. This nonpartisan group is dedicated to fostering civic discourse and encouraging meaningful dialogue among community members. And they've organized an upcoming forum featuring candidates for U.S. Senate, and it's scheduled for this Saturday, June 28th, at the Circular Congregation Church in downtown Charleston. And joining us is Susan Dunn from Silence is Not an Option to tell us more about the mission and what we can expect from this upcoming event. Thank you for being with us.
Oh, it's good to be here.
Yeah, let's talk first about how this organization came about, came into fruition, and started moving forward. What's the mission and why does it now exist?
And this came about from a small group of women who were frustrated and tired and feeling siloed and tired of being afraid, and felt that there were issues that really needed to be talked about and that chaos was keeping them from being able to communicate. And so they simply sent out emails inviting family and friends and people that they knew to come together to talk about those issues. And in less than 2 weeks, there was a meeting that had over 400 women respond.
And what were these women saying? The same kinds of things?
They were actually saying many different things, because some people cared really passionately about one issue or another about another issue. But this brought together people who wanted to be part of the public conversation in issues that they cared very deeply about.
Was there a through line at all in terms of what they wanted to do as an organization? Was it all about people talking and being together and discussing whatever they agree with or did not disagree?
I think it was really for people to be heard and to participate in the conversation and to not have their silence interpreted as some kind of an agreement with what was happening.
So what were the main mission points of the organization? What did you decide that you wanted to do as a next step after that initial meeting or those first conversations?
Well, the group itself was asked to use Post-it notes to indicate what they were interested in. And so in the second meeting, we broke out into groups that related to those issues. So people wanted to talk about immigration issues, they wanted to talk about abuse of power, they wanted to talk about communication. They wanted to talk about varying different issues, and we divided up into those issues and then talked about what could be done, what information was needed, and where we could go from here.
And as varied as the conversations that people were having, the women also varied in terms of age, backgrounds, faith, all those kinds of things?
Yes, yeah. I mean, it's not, the group does kind of skew old at this point, but we really, really want younger people to participate. But you keep the doors and windows open and invite.
I heard someone just say, who's Susan calling old? I don't know. I may have heard that, may not have. But let's talk about the event that's coming up this Saturday that I'm happy to be a part of as well.
Yeah, well, one of the things that we decided is that there needed to be more places where people could ask questions and get information in a civilized sort of way. And so we decided, well, people are running for U.S. Senate. Let's invite them all to come and talk to us about why they're running, what their issues are, and we'll ask them questions about what we would like to know about. And so we invited everybody, and the forum will take place at 10 o'clock on Saturday.
That's right. And so who are those participating? We know that some candidates are not able to participate for various reasons, but there are 4 who have committed to being there on Saturday.
That's correct.
And who are those candidates?
And that's it's Annie Andrews,
Dr.
will be
Annie
there,
Andrews,
and Lee Johnson. Well, I don't know them all.
Kyle Johnson,
right.
I believe, and the other candidates are? Bruce Fleming.
Yeah.
Okay.
Kathy.
Yeah. All right. All right. Well, we look forward to seeing you on Saturday. I will be there as well. No registration is required. Right. People will just show up and be first come, first served in terms of the seats.
Right. Okay. And also, if they can't come on Saturday, they can live stream it. And if they also just want to join the group and can't come, they can email us at silencenotoption@gmail.com.
All right. Thank you so much. Okay. We appreciate it. And of course, we want you to stay right here with us. We are coming right back with more of News 2 at 4.